More and more information is coming out about this Sony Marvel Spider-Man debacle, and these latest bits are both incredibly interesting and telling of what's going on with the deal, but also pretty ugly.
It's like the news, but for nerds.
Today's shout out goes to Raul Betancourt. Indeed, Genki Lee is the best friend of Miles Morales. Make sure you stay to the end of this video where we will ask another nerd card question. What's up, everybody? Happy Thursday to you. I'm Josh. Welcome back to the den. And I want to say before we get into more of the Spider-Man stuff, and yeah, it's getting ugly. Holy cow, it's getting ugly. I want to actually remind everybody that this weekend is D23, and here at the channel we're very excited for this. There's going to be a lot of new trailers, information dropped about Star Wars and about Marvel. So make sure you're subscribed and come back to the channel this weekend when we break down a lot of this cool nerdy stuff. Okay, so let's get into this. I don't really like going back to the well to do multiple stories on a single topic, but the Spider-Man Sony Marvel drama is massive. This is huge news, seemingly came out of nowhere, and it has shocked the entire internet. And so yeah, we're talking about it again because there's new updates. Now, before we get into some of these new developments and talk about how ugly this situation is getting, I want to first correct something we got wrong in our reporting yesterday. As I've been saying to you guys since this story broke, a lot of stuff is coming out. It's a complicated situation. We're learning more and more each day. But one thing that we got seemingly incorrect yesterday was this idea of a 50% split. This was reported by a lot of different people, including the initial Deadline report, and this is that what Disney wanted was a 50% split of all of the Spider-Man movie profits. But then later, a report from the Hollywood Reporter came out, and a lot of people ran with this story, citing a 30% take, that essentially what happened here was that Disney actually was willing to settle for 30% of the cost into the movies and then 30% of the profits. So they wanted to co-finance the Spider-Man movies, make them even more of a Disney and a Marvel thing. They came at Sony with 30% and Sony said no. So technically this makes Disney a little less greedy than we presented yesterday in a video, because 30% is way better than 50%, but I'm actually hearing conflicting reports about this. It's very possible that this is just negotiation stuff, that Disney was like, hey, we want 50. They were like, no. They were like, okay, we'll settle for 30. And Sony was like, no. So it's really hard to say what's going on here, but that is a new development. It's something that we got incorrect yesterday. New information has come out. 30% is the number. So judge that for yourself, whether or not you think now, hey, it's totally Sony being ridiculous. It's not even 50% like we were talking about yesterday, or that's still really greedy of Disney, you know, whatever you're thinking, but we want to update you with that info. Now, a couple of things that we got correct yesterday is mainly that this is just business people and money decisions screwing over fandom. And we also got correct that this is not Kevin Feige at all. Kevin Feige is not negotiating this, and it was not his idea to remove himself as a producer from the future Spider-Man movies. That is a Disney decision, but it was made by Alan Horn. Alan Horn is the guy that is negotiating this deal between Disney and Sony. But again, at the end of the day, this is just money decisions screwing up with a fandom, and I do think both corporations here are to blame. But none of this stuff should have been made public. This all should have happened behind closed doors, and what's happening now is the fact that it's getting way uglier. So let's talk about some of this ugly stuff, man. First of all, Jeremy Renner comes out and calls out Sony and says that give Marvel and Disney and the real Stan Lee back Spider-Man, sort of insinuating that the real Stan Lee would rather have Spider-Man at Marvel. Tom Holland and Zendaya both unfollowed Sony on Instagram, which is sort of like a passive-aggressive sort of shove in the face, like kicking sand up at Sony. It's like a millennial thing. If you're an older member of the audience, don't worry, but this is basically just them throwing shade at Sony, sort of stating their alliance for Marvel and for Disney. Then Tom Holland's dad came out, called out Sony, and again said, give everything back to Disney. And so things started to really get crazy with a lot of people that are attached to the projects, different people like that saying, hey, I don't like this, and throwing shade publicly at Sony. As we said yesterday, we really believe this was leaked by Sony, and a lot of people are corroborating that report as well, but it would appear that things have totally gotten out of hand, and the perception has changed completely from what they thought it would, and everybody out there's pretty much like, hey, f you, Sony. And so it was looking real bad for Sony in the PR war about this whole situation, and that was until Stan Lee's daughter came out and threw some of the worst shade I've ever seen at Marvel and at Disney. This comes from an interview with TMZ, and here's basically what she said here. Marvel and Disney seeking total control of my father's creations must be checked and balanced by others who, while still seeking to profit, have genuine respect for Stan Lee and his legacy. Whether it's Sony or someone else's, the continued evolution of Stan's characters and his legacy deserves multiple points of view. When my father died, no one from Marvel or Disney reached out to me. From day one, they have commoditized my father's work and never shown him or his legacy any respect or decency. In the end, no one could have treated my father worse than Marvel and Disney's executives. I mean, damn, like, damn. Now, as many Marvel fans will start to point out and like jump on immediately, like that's not exactly true. There's plenty of people at Marvel Studios and presumably at Disney as well that really do respect Stan Lee's legacy. The fact that they put him in all of these cameo roles, the fact that it was such a big deal to have him at all of the shoots and to bring him to all the premieres, they showed respect to the legacy. I think that's a little bit disingenuous, but I believe that a lot of her anger is well founded. I believe her when she says that nobody at Marvel or Disney reached out to her when the father died, when Stan Lee died. I mean, everybody makes public statements, but do they actually reach out to the family? Not so much. And it's totally worth mentioning that although Stan Lee was a really good sport about it, he saw next to nothing from the MCU's profits. Disney, Marvel, not interested in giving this dude a freaking dime. And I don't believe he's been making money from Marvel for a long, long time. He makes money off royalties, he makes money off certain things, but Disney and Marvel, being the big corporations that they are, they've essentially tried to screw him out of as much money as they possibly could, because that's just what corporations do. And despite us being called shills a lot, because I do love the MCU and a lot of our coverage here about Marvel tends to be super positive, I think it's worth noting here, I do not personally view Disney as a good guy, almost in any scenario. And even though I like some of the things that Disney does, guys, I'm old enough to remember that Disney lobbied in Hollywood to change copyright laws. You know, like those old FBI warning messages that are saying if you copy this freaking videotape on another videotape, you could get fined $500,000 and go to prison for over a decade. That was Disney. Like, that was Disney being shady as hell and really trying to make an example of people to stop piracy. So they're not like this good guy, like white knight corporation. Disney's just a corporation. They've had good things they've done. They've had bad things they've done. But I do agree with some of the sentiment from Stan Lee's daughter. Some of this monopolization does need checked. Although, and this is where it gets back to, you know, how this should have never come out publicly, but essentially here, the reason this breaks my heart so much is because I know for sure that Kevin Feige respects the hell out of Stan Lee. Kevin Feige is one of us. He's one of us. He's a nerd, guys. This is why he's been so successful at doing what he's doing in the MCU, and it just sucks that now he has to be associated with something that Stan Lee's daughter comes out and says. Stan Lee's daughter comes out and shoots fire at Disney, maybe rightfully so. I mean, we don't know all the details of how they've treated her or how they even treated Stan, but I have to believe in the sentiment here, the emotion here, it's coming from a real place. And now Feige's attached to that? Man, this just sucks so bad. And the more ugly stuff that comes out, the less likely it is that this deal actually comes together. Like, it's turning a really bad way here. And if it's proven that Sony is the one that actually leaked this, which I like 99% believe, then I mean, like, dude, it's Sony all day. Like, honestly, I can't believe they've allowed this to escalate to this situation. And I'm not even mad at them for not wanting to give up 30%. Like, maybe you could fight that down to 25 or 20 or something. That's totally fine. But for them to leak it and basically allow all this bad PR to happen for both them and Disney at this point, it's like unexcusable. This is dirty and it's underhanded. And so I hope you can see where I'm coming at from this. A lot of this is like my personal opinions of it, but it's just ultimately business people messing it up for fans. The fact that it's getting really ugly right now sucks for everybody involved, including us fans. And again, I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that Sony leaked it. We can't prove that, but guys, if Sony leaked this, then they've done tremendous damage and just caused a lot of pain and turmoil for the fans this week, and that sucks. Now, real quick before we get out of here, I did want to speculate just a bit about what it could mean for Phase 4 if Spider-Man's gone. If we truly have to say goodbye to Spider-Man in the MCU, what does this mean for Phase 4? Well, if you look at Phase 4, Spider-Man's not on this list at all, so presumably not a lot would actually change for Phase 4. I think the biggest and most significant change with Spider-Man being gone would be the impact that Far From Home would have. I mean, it literally devalues Sony's movie Far From Home more than anything, because what Marvel can do if they want is retcon it so that that movie actually took place in an alternate reality. Because with the multiverse, this is totally a thing now. This is totally possible. Marvel can just completely ignore everything that happened there, say it was a branch timeline, and therefore all of the things that are set up in that movie don't really matter as much anymore, and all of its connections to the MCU proper kind of dissolve. I'm not saying they should do that, but if Sony actually leaked this stuff and caused all this drama, then they should totally do that. F you, Sony. Now, we talk a lot about Dark Avengers here. We're pretty sure that Feige wants to do Dark Avengers in the MCU, and this would have involved the Norman Osborn character. We've known for a long time that Feige wants Norman Osborn in the MCU proper. Well, that dream could pretty much die if Spider-Man's gone completely, and in this scenario, I do think Justin Hammer or the Mandarin or somebody else will take the role of what Norman Osborn did in the Siege comics and, you know, leading up into Dark Avengers. But they still totally have that play and that room. So again, not that much of an impact on Phase 4, just kind of a different flavor of something we've seen in the comics. Finally, the biggest thing I think this would change for Phase 4 is that they will streamline the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. That's gonna be a thing. Like, they were already planning on getting these characters into the MCU as quickly as possible, but now if Sony's truly doing their own thing, they will want to shift the focus away from the Spider-Man character onto the X-Men and onto the Fantastic Four. And I literally believe that if this deal goes the way it's going now, that Feige will streamline in the mutants, streamline in Fantastic Four, and we will get Fantastic Four and X-Men way sooner than we would have gotten otherwise. Now, that's a lot of speculation on my part, but I'm just saying here, guys, that at the end of the day, I think Sony would actually be hurt way worse than Marvel in this situation. And the more I think about it, Phase 4 will likely still be intact, and there's still a bunch of cool stuff that Marvel can do. And we will start to get really excited for the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, and we will forget about this tragedy of the Peter Parker character when it comes to Sony and Marvel. That's pretty much it for today's show, guys. What do you think about these new ugly updates to the Marvel-Sony deal? And what do you think about some of the speculation I brought up about Phase 4? Your any and every thought is appreciated. Let us know in the comment section below. And now let's check the nerd card before we get out of here. I want to know, what does Happy Hogan give to Tony Stark's daughter at the end of Endgame to try to comfort her? It's a really cool moment, but the question remains, what does Happy give to Tony Stark's daughter to help her cope at the end of Avengers Endgame? Answer that question in the comment section below. As I always say, I hope you're having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next video.